Is exploiting a glitch in Valorant morally wrong? With the beta phase of Valorant, we've seen a lot of hype. Overhyped to the point where the game itself becomes secondary. Everyone wants to dig into the new marvelous game and profit from it. How video game content creating works is that whoever makes the more insightful, entertaining, clever videos the fastest gets their name out there ultimately to become an authority within the game. The race to the top is fierce, so everything is on limits, allowed. Or is it? We've seen countless of videos about glitch spots, camera spots, Sova recon, arrow lineups, Omen, teleport spots. Some of them are just clever as they use the map to its whole potential. And some are more questionable as they glitch out the given map, making it impossible to do anything to counterplay it. But first, let's paint a picture, an example of how the new players act and educate themselves in a new video game like Valorant. When a new game comes up and you hop onto the game, the first experience is very similar to how small children view the world and how they learn the basic ethics. In both of these occasions, we spend our first minutes jumping, scratching, crawling, and in general just seeing how the world feels like. Once you get the basic movements done, you start to test how the game works. Now, much like in actual world, there are rules and norms that as adults have been molded into. We're not supposed to do this and that, we take care of each other and we don't break stuff. We learn these things from our parents and older people. There's very little morality when it comes to small children. They just know what feels good and what feels bad, but that's pretty much it. I guess that is one basis for morality right there. So, the children start to test their limits. They watch how their parents react to certain actions. If a child drops their mug from the table, they watch how their mother reacts. In a sense, the small child is finding the rule set of how to play in the real world, in the human world. Alright, so back into the gaming. There's a new game out and we're all hopping in and testing a bunch of stuff out. It's fun to poke the game, the map and the mechanics, what you can do, how the game is supposed to be played and how certain things break. And they do break in the games of 2020 because most of the stuff we see are in complete early access or in beta phases. So who is there to bear resemblance to the parents setting up the rule set? Well, other older players and the developers. The other players quickly mold you into the game's rule set, how to play and what to avoid, how to win even. But the poking doesn't stop there. Many of us spend hours and hours finding the limits of the game. That is where the developers come in. They are the parents that set up the rules, the playground, what is part of the game and what is not. We are the children testing the limits. Now, let's get to the question of, is exploiting a glitch in Valorant morally wrong? I would say it's complicated. We have to take into consideration the case of Valorant. It is an online competitive game with some serious resources put into it. It's a game in beta phase, so that it's not a finished product, but that there are already highly competitive tournaments and even careers on the line. In general, people would agree that exploiting a glitch in an online game is worse than, let's say, in an offline game. Speedrunners are tremendously popular and those runs are practically fueled by glitches and exploits. In old Nintendo Super Mario Bros, some speedrunners are actually doing some basic coding inside the game to glitch out and beat the game prematurely. If something like that would be done in an online competitive game, it would be highly game-breaking. But it is done offline, so nobody else's games gets wrecked because of the exploit. In fact, it's basically a contest of who can exploit the game the most. It's wrong to exploit, but not exactly. But now we're talking about the game of Valorant. It is an online game, so the question of right and wrong is different, of course. In an online game, you are sharing the gaming experience with a bunch of people, therefore using an exploit is basically putting other gamers' experience, fairness and enjoyment on the line. So surely the morality aspect is more severe. Well, yes, but here's the thing. Valorant is also in semi-open beta. It is not a finished product, and beta phases are used to gain data and information on the game, how it runs and where the bugs and problems lie. So the game developers actually want to hear of all the bugs and exploits players can find. Beta is a place where all the bug finders are cherished. because that's what the face is for. Now let's talk about a scenario where a player finds out about a game-breaking bug. What are the different actions they can do and what are the moral obligations? The worst thing that a player can do is to keep it to themselves or only share it to a couple of friends and that's it. The player doesn't live stream the bug, doesn't upload it anywhere to be seen or shared, doesn't post the bug to the official forums, but just keep it to yourself and hold it dearly. That would ruin a lot of games and most likely it would never get fixed, at least not many times soon. You use the exploit and try to hold it from others so that the information of it doesn't get shared with others, increasing its odds of finding the eyes of a developer. Now that's a dick move. The more players push the boundaries of the game, the better information the developers get on where the work needs to be done. Streamers and other content creators, for example, are putting a lot of hours in custom games to find out how to push the mechanics to the absolute limits. And then they use that knowledge to boost their ranks. Some share their exploits for views. This is of course questionable in moral standpoint because they do it to gain from the game's bugs and also share the exploit for countless others to use. But here's the thing, the developers see it too. So it's kind of a mixed bag for streamers and content creators to be using exploits. They gain from the bugs, but they spread it for larger audience to increase the odds of developers seeing it. Using the same small children and parents example, it would be better for the child to do the morally questionable stuff under the eyes of the parent, rather than doing the evil deeds alone in the corner. It's essential that the parent or the developer sees the immoral action so that actions can be made. And for the record, the best thing to do morally would be to post the bug and the exploit straight to the developers in their Riot support pages. The second best would be to post it to the subreddit or this developer site over here. Do one of these things if you find an exploit. Do both of these things. But will the highly competitive, career-changing tournaments get affected by the glitches? They might, but here's the thing. When tournaments take place, the stakeholders, the ones creating and arranging the tournaments, also create their own rule set. They always include rules to disqualify you and your team for using a game-breaking exploit. The player or the team who uses the exploit should know the danger of using it. They actively take a risk of disqualification by using the exploit. And the higher the stakes at the tournament, the better the spectators and rules are. It would be only a matter of time for somebody using dirty mechanics to get caught. So it is unlikely that the players would use hidden exploits to their advantage in serious tournaments. Abusing game mechanics and pushing the maps to their limits is not pretty, but neither is doing a cross-check on an ice hockey match. Cross-checking is something you get penalized for, but it happens all the time on professional ice hockey. The difference between a penalty and a good defense play is often the outcome and the situation. If you push somebody away from your goal in a tight spot, it's good for your team as you probably saved a goal. But if the cross-checked player gets hurt, or you do it too many times in situation where it's not necessary, the referee is going to call you out on it, give you a 2-minute penalty and cost your team a likely goal. The boundary of clever use of rule set and what calls for action is not clear. Only those who hold the power of justice can make the call. And if some mechanic or action becomes dangerous for the integrity of the game or an individual in this example, a change of ruling needs to be done. Players play within the rules that are given and you can't blame them for that. Cross-checking is awful and many players have got concussions out of them or even worse injuries, but they still happen to these days because in certain situations cross-checking aren't getting called out. Can you blame the players for doing that? I'll let you guys decide. In the case of Valorant, the developers are at the highest position for ruling. If you aim to create a highly competitive esports game, you need to put the work into it so that the rules are clear. Is cross-checking allowed or not? Is using some game mechanic in an exploiting manner bannable or not? You cannot blame it on the players themselves and hope for a fair and just game. You need to have a clear rule set and clear consequences, otherwise it is not game worth playing. And once the rules are set, the players take the risk of discipline by abusing them. But remember, we are but a flock of children poking and breaking stuff, waiting to see how the mom reacts. Taking info. Too long. Täysillä smoke. Täysillä smoke. Let me get it. Let me get it. Hyvää valo. Yes.
Nice, good job, man.